Have you ever heard of nature journaling? I know I hadn't until we started homeschooling. Well, in the next 2 episodes, we're going to be learning all about nature journaling from Mr. Nature Journal himself, John Muir Laws. In this video, he'll be discussing the major tenets of nature journaling. And then in the next episode, part 2, he will actually show us how to nature journal. And y'all, it is so mesmerizing, you're not going to want to miss the conversation or the visual demonstration. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I am so excited to introduce John. He goes by Jack Muir Laws. He is a principal leader and innovator of the worldwide nature journaling movement. Jack is a scientist, educator, and author who helps people forge a deeper and a more personal connection with nature through keeping illustrated nature journals and understanding science. His work intersects science, art, and mindfulness. Trained as a wildlife biologist and an associate of the California Academy of Sciences, he observes the world with rigorous attention. He looks for mysteries, plays with ideas, and seeks connections in all he sees. Attention, observation, curiosity, and creative thinking are not gifts, but skills that grow with training and deliberate practice. As an educator and author, Jack teaches techniques and supports routines that develop these skills to make them part of everyday life. Jack, thank you so much. It is such an honor to have you here today. So thank you for coming on and teaching us about nature journaling.
I'm so happy to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
So, okay, when I first started homeschooling, I found your videos on YouTube and was totally mesmerized and delighted. And quite frankly, I had never heard of nature journaling. I had never seen nature journaling. And then I find out that the whole homeschooling world knows about it. And somehow I missed it. But then again, I was new to the homeschooling world. So how did you get involved and start nature journaling or discover it? Because you're kind of like the father of nature journaling.
Oh, no, actually, I'm not. I am just I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. There's generations and generations. This isn't something new. There's generations of people who've been doing this for a very, very, very long time. So the idea of taking a notebook and using it to get your thoughts, your observations, the connections that you make to explore mysteries goes way, way, way back. You know, everybody's seen Da Vinci's notebooks. It's exactly that same process, but it goes back even before Da Vinci. And so it's a old school technology, which we've just brought into our modern age. I think it was forgotten for a little while. Somebody who helped kind of resurrect it and sort of bring it functionally back into the attention of a lot of us is a woman named Claire Walker Leslie. When I was a kid, she wrote this book, Nature Drawing, A Tool for Learning. And it was, for me, a really foundational book in developing my own practice. I actually had been doing my version of it before I got a hold of her book. But once I had that in my little paws, I was like, oh, this is a thing? What fun! And then I could start looking around at all sorts of, you start looking at the notebooks of other people and going like, what are you doing? Because those notebooks show you how people are thinking. And then when you start to play with those strategies, all of a sudden you're thinking differently. So it's this incredible lens for changing how you think and allowing you to kind of get so much more richness out of any encounter or observation.
Interesting. That is so cool. What have you found have been some of the benefits for those who do nature journal?
Well, I would say first and foremost, it is a way of paying attention to the world around us. Our attention is critically important. I think of attention is the fabric of connection and love.
Wow, I believe that.
Think about your relationship with your child and how an act of deliberate attention builds a bridge between their heart and mind and yours.
It's true. Which it's interesting because the other day my daughter was trying to talk to me and I was looking at an email on my phone and she's like, Mom, look at me in the eyeballs. I want your attention. And I was like,
Yep.
Yep, okay, put away my phone. Like, and she's like, the phone takes that away from me, and I need your eyeballs.
It absolutely does.
So humbling, so humbling.
Yeah, and we so often we're saying like, kids these days just on their devices. Have you seen their parents?
Yeah.
Right?
Guilty.
Like, who could be role modeling this behavior as they drive to work texting, or sit there at their child's recital on their device, or at the family when you're sitting down to eat together. Out come these devices, and the devices are divisive. The devices. You see, attention is love. Attention is love. My working definition of love is sustained, compassionate attention. And when you sustain your attention with another or with a place, think about your spouse, your partner, your child. It profoundly changes you, but it takes work.
Yeah.
But it profoundly changes you, and it builds a deep connection there. These devices, which we now carry in our pockets, are attention pirates.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
They are designed by the world's leading cognitive psychologists of how to get us hooked into a platform and how to keep us there. They know when to make it whip. They know when to make it whop. Right?
Yeah.
They know when to make the screen flash, when to have a little hepatic buzz in your hand, when to kind of have a bell or a star. They know how to feed into our reward circuits to keep us scrolling. And, you think about it, these things, but it's free. Like, what's going on with that? No, it's not free. What they're doing is they are memorizing your brain, and then they're going to take that and they sell it to somebody else. They're commodifying your attention, and they are better at it than we are at resisting it.
That's true.
Right? So what this journal is a way of reclaiming your attention. What we do is it is an analog form without whip or blop to kind of sucker you in. And it allows you to go deeply into the presence of whatever phenomenon is in front of you. Whether you're looking out at the flowers blooming on the redbud, or you're looking inside of you at how does that affect me? What does that remind me of? How does that take me back to when I was in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada with my mother? She showed me the flowers of redbud. Whatever it is, your attention is something that you can take back. You can reclaim it through the pages of a journal. And what the journal does is gives you permission to pay deep attention, take all your observations, record them one alongside another, and to, in whatever form comes most naturally to you. So some people are more writers, some people are more drawers, some people are more quantitative. And so you can start with whatever mode works best for you. And you document and describe what you are experiencing. And then you can push yourself a little bit outside of your comfort bubble into, let's say I'm a writer. Now I'm going to just challenge myself to make a map or a diagram or just a few visual representations of what I'm seeing. Not so much that it freaks me out, oh no, right? But enough so that you're slightly outside of your comfort zone. And in that space, you will notice things that you otherwise wouldn't have seen just because you shifted modes.
Interesting.
And this, getting it out of your head, you can say, like, why can't I just look at it? Why can't I just pay attention to it? Well, it turns out that the human brain cannot handle complexity.
Interesting.
If you, what is 37 multiplied by 146?
Oh, I'd have to do it on paper.
Exactly. So the paper can actually handle that, because you're carrying this and you're putting this down there. We can't remember that. You can remember 7 different things at a time, plus or minus 2.
Well, really, just 5.
Yeah. So very often, like oh boy, it's going to be a 5-day.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes only a 3-day.
so, but the piece of paper can handle the complexity. And so you get all this stuff out of your memory, your present observation, all this stuff down on the page, and then you can look at it and it presents back to you, this is your experience, in a way that you can perceive different levels of nuance and wonder that you actually would not be able to detect if you're just staring at nature. And then that's true for the external world and the internal. If anybody who's listening to this keeps a diary,
Yeah.
yeah, guess what? People who keep diaries, the research shows they're more emotionally intelligent than people who don't.
That's good news.
I don't keep a diary, so that tells you a lot about me. Right? But the research is really clear on it. People who keep diaries tend to learn from their mistakes, and they have introspection. And what the diary does is, for somebody who doesn't have a diary, let's say they're going through a breakup. Mm-hmm. They sit there on their couch, pounding chocolate, and ruminating about the same scene again and again and again. Like, first this happened, and then that, and then that part was wonderful, and then this, and now it's gone. First this, and then that, and it was wonderful, and that, but then now it's gone. Like, they're just in this loop until you come over and you make some tea, and you say, okay, talk to me about it. And they say, well, first it was wonderful, and then this happened, and then that happened, and but now it's gone. And then once they kind of get that out, and it's in discussion with you, they actually kind of start to clear away for the next thought and the next thought. But when they're sitting there on their couch, they were in a rumination loop. They couldn't get out of that. And the diary does that for you. So the diary says, okay, yeah, you already put that down. Give me the next thought.
Yeah, time to move on. Yeah, I love that.
And you're so you actually do that for yourself. So think about that kind of ruminating, that you feel like I'm processing this, but no, you're stuck. You're stuck until your friend comes over with the tea, or you pull out your piece of paper. So you want to get unstuck and get out of your head. You got to call your friend over with the tea. And as we're observing, we also get stuck. So there's this crazy research where they put helmets on people that tracked their eyeball motions and had them look at works of art and say, I want you to really take this in, like really study this. And people would go, okay. And so they'd sit in front of a work of art, and they would, maybe 15 minutes staring at the thing. And you'd ask them, so what are you doing? I'm studying the whole thing. I'm really kind of taking it. Their subjective experiences, they're really letting this in. And then when you track their eyeball motions, they're looking about 5 different things again and again and again and again and again and again and again. But they have the subjective experience of just oh, I'm really taking it in. But they're not. Their brain is being really practical and going look, for your survival, I'm going to make this easier for you. You don't need to look any harder. Just notice these things and then just loop. And that's easy because thinking takes calories. Attention takes work. And if your brain has a way of kind of circumventing that, it will.
Yeah. I love that. Well, it's true. I heard that chess players, when they're playing and they're really concentrating and really thinking, that they burn just an obscene amount of calories because they are so focused and trying to pay attention to every little thing. So it makes sense. But I think it's fascinating that you said that our brain just loops it because we can't handle any more information than that. I was just in an art gallery a couple months ago, and I'm like, yeah, it's true. I had looked at the exact same spots over and over this one picture. And I was like, I couldn't tell you the rest of the picture though.
Yeah.
That's the sad part.
Yeah, and then with that 7 plus or minus 2, you then go to the next picture and you kind of stare at it, and your brain's going yep, and then you go to the next thing and you go, yep, And what your brain is doing is you're kicking out all that other stuff. And you're thinking, but it's going to be really logged in my memory. No, because that would take work. And then you ask people tell me about the show, they might tell you about the last couple of pieces that were in it because those were the most recent ones that they saw. your brain is wiping away the rest of it. There's also like all this weird research where they're looking at what is the impact of just the most recent thing in how you evaluate an experience. Let's say you have a terrible time going to summer camp, but the last day was great. You come home and you say summer camp was great.
So weird. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
there's this here's like twisted things that psychologists do to graduate students. You check out this experiment. They gave people, there's this bucket of ice water. You ever stuck your hand in a bucket of ice water?
Yeah, they had me do that before I had my first child to practice.
Oh, yes. They also had the dads do it. I was there with my wife, and we're like doing the breathing thing, right? With their hand in the bucket of ice water. Oh, right. So here, you check this out. There were two groups. One of them, you stick their hand in the bucket of ice water for 3 minutes. This is no fun at all. And at the end of that 3 minutes, the water temperature started to get warmer. And because they started to squirt in some warm water with it. And then after another minute, you could take your hand out. But the end water was not as cold as it was at the start. But they had a full 3 minutes of hand in the ice water. Right? Then there's this other group of people who stick their hand in ice water. And at the end of 3 minutes, they say, okay, now take your hand out. How bad was that experience? The people who had their hand in the ice water for 3 minutes and took it out right there at the end, they say, that was horrible. It really hurt. I don't want to do this again. I don't like your experiment. But those people who had their hand in the ice water and then it warmed at the end, they go, that wasn't that bad. Right? And their experience was objectively worse because they had to have their hand in the cold water longer. But their final experience was like, it wasn't that bad. And so you remember the last thing. So we remember the end of the art exhibit. We don't remember the things in the middle. Yeah. You go to a lecture, there are all these interesting points. And people kind of like at the end of it, you say like, what really sticks out for you? People will tell you about one of the ideas that popped up at the end of the talk.
That's true. Yeah.
And so again, how can you get around this? I just went to a lecture and I journaled all the way through it. And then they turned down the lights, and so I was writing
Trying
in the
to
dark and kind of like with the kind of the light of the emergency exit, trying to see if I could get some notes down.
You could draw, yeah.
And
love it.
then I was with a dear friend of mine, and at the end, he and I were talking about the content of the lecture. And because I had those notes, I was able to go back to the top. Like, this part was really interesting. Like, oh yeah, I totally forgot about that. And we both would have forgotten about it if I hadn't kind of gotten it down on the piece of paper. So those pieces of paper we think better when we can get our thinking out of our electric meat between our ears and onto some what's called sort of a distributed cognition device, right? So when you're journaling or you're diarying, right? This is distributed cognition. We used to think that all our thinking happened between our ears, but now we realize that these tools, such as a journal, as a diary, that these are part of the actual fabric of how we think. And when we extend our thinking using these tools, our thinking is better. The piece of paper makes us more effective at handling complexity. Like, I'm willing to bet that you and 99.99% of the listeners have a list somewhere in their kitchen of the things that you need to get at the grocery store.
I sure do.
Isn't it interesting how psychic I am that I was able to tell that, right?
I'm kind of amazed.
It's astounding. The reason that we all have that is because it works. And those people who don't have it get over to the grocery store and end up binge shopping.
Mm-hmm. I've done that too. And then I go into Walmart expecting to buy 2 things and end up with about 150 things.
Yeah. You get all the things from the end caps that say, look,
right,
I'm blue.
And then I forget what I came in for in the first place.
Yeah, that's right. But if you have the list, then you kind of go down the list and you check it off. And then, bada boom, you've got the things on your list. You don't have the things that aren't on your list. So you don't fill your pantry up with that junk. You end up thinking better because of that list. That list is part of your distributed cognition network. So just as that list works, right now, if I needed to get eggs, which I do, and I was just if I was sitting here through this whole interview thinking like eggs, gotta get the eggs. Every time you would ask me a question, I would be thinking like, okay, yeah, and give you kind of part of my brain, but part of my brain would be like, don't forget the eggs.
Yeah, please remember the eggs.
And then when this conversation gets really, really interesting, I'm going to forget that I got to get the eggs.
It's so weird how our brain works. I mean, it's amazing because like our brains are so fascinating, but it's crazy because it's true. Like even before we started talking, I had written down several things that I wanted to talk to you about because I'm like, I will forget. I'm going to forget. And I don't want to be like trying to listen to him and be like, what was I? Wait, what did I want to ask it? I can't remember. But it's true.
Blessed are the list makers, for they shall get things done. Right?
Amen.
That's
Amen
right.
on a Monday.
Those lists, it is interesting. So just for the same reason that all those lists work, the reason that you've got that piece of paper in front of you, that's sort of a microcosm of how. Actually, I got to put something down on my list here. I just saw a hummingbird come to the empty hummingbird feeder.
Ooh.
So I'm going to put down fill feeder.
So don't forget.
Now I can let that thought go. And the hummingbirds will be okay, and our conversation will be okay too.
I love it. Okay, so what are some of the major principles or like the major things that we need to know about nature journaling?
Okay, the most important thing is that it is not as tricky or difficult or hard as you think. This isn't some complex mystic process. This is really pretty straightforward.
Yay!
So, and you can do it. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a naturalist. You can absolutely do this thing. You've got everything that it takes to be a nature journaler, and you can start today. Because I bet because of one of those art classes that you took at some point, but then kind of gave up on, somewhere in your closet is that box marked art supplies, and there's an old journal in it, an old notebook with a whole bunch of blank pages, because you're thinking, I should get one of these art sketchbooks, right? So you're going to get that thing out. That'll work perfectly for this. Right? You've already got the tools. You don't need any special brush or pen or pencil. Get some of your favorite drawing tools, and what you're going to do is, I like to think of it this way. There is the big why, there is the how, and there's the what. So here's the big why. If you pay deeper attention to the world around you, the world around you will reveal secrets and mysteries and beauty that you otherwise would have missed or forgotten. This will make your life richer because it allows you to reclaim your attention.
That is beautiful.
That's our big why, right? So you're doing this for you. And the world, as you do this, you're going to find that the world opens up to you. Now, let's think about the what. Like, what are you doing? I like to think of 3 major categories of things. And I call this the I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. That's my mantra. I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of. I do this when I'm nature journaling. I do this when I'm thinking about a book. I do this when I am discussing literature or Shakespeare with my daughter. I do this when I'm listening to music. I do this all the time with everything. And so I notice is just, what do you observe? If you observe it, if you see something, say something. Put it down on your piece of paper. Right? That observation, that observation, that observation. You get them all out of your head and onto the piece of paper. The piece of paper can hold all this stuff. Right? So get those observations down on the piece of paper. And then it's, I notice, I wonder. So the I wonder is, I'm going to deliberately trigger my curiosity. I'm going to get intentionally curious about what is happening in front of me. And when you're curious, everything's a lot more fun. Curiosity is really, really, really fun. And it's a skill. The more you practice curiosity, the more you can make yourself, like, let's do some curiosity right now. I can look out at anything, and you can just sort of stare at it. But if you get yourself kind of curious about something, where you kind of notice something like, oh, what's up with that? Right? And what you start to realize is that rabbit holes that you can fall down are everywhere. And then you're starting to intentionally, like, let's look for some rabbit holes. And it's not to try to fill them up, but because the goal is, if you can go spelunking down a rabbit hole, just dive into it. You are bathing in curiosity. And when you're curious, this is kind of cool, going back to some brain stuff, they found out that when you're curious, your brain releases dopamine.
No kidding.
Yep. You want some dopamine? Get curious. That kind of lean in feeling that we get when we're curious about something, that is a big slosh of dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter, and in the presence of this neurotransmitter, you're able to stick with something longer. And check this out, your memory of what you were doing goes way, way, way up. Not just for the thing that caught your curiosity, but for all the related observations that are kind of circling around that. Because it's this generally available neurotransmitter in your brain, it is improving your memory not just for the target of your curiosity, but for all the rest of the phenomena that are in the details that are going on around you. So
wow.
Your brain works better when you're curious. Even if you don't answer these questions, and you will answer some of them, but you'll probably end up asking many more questions than you can ever answer in a lifetime. Your brain works better when you're curious, and it makes it easier for you then to get into a flow state, that state where time just disappears and you just are absorbed in the wonder of whatever moment is in front of you. So intentionally going for curiosity.
Wow, that's really cool.
It is wonderful. It feels so good to find a mystery and get to play with it with your brain.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I was talking to my little girl about that we homeschool a lot, where we'll start.
Tell me more about this homeschool. I have to write this down.
Homeschool. I didn't coin it. I saw it on a meme once, and the meme was really funny. It said that day, that moment when you started to learn about water pressure and somehow ended up on a live game cam watching a baby owl, and then you're finalizing a falafel recipe. But the other day, my 9-year-old daughter, she's my caboose of my kids, and we started. She had a question. She was drawn. Okay, she wanted to do this thing for a neighbor child that's younger than her, and she wanted to make a little fishing pond for them. So she drew these different fish, and then she drew a jellyfish. And I said, oh, the jellyfish actually has tentacles, because she just drew some like little cones. And I said, actually, jellyfish have little squiggles. And she said, well, can we look up jellyfish on YouTube? And I said, yes, let's look up it on YouTube and learn about jellyfish, which then they've talked about how jellyfish are venomous and they can sting you. So she said, well, can we look up why they're venomous? So then we looked up why they're venomous. And as we're looking at why they're venomous, we also learned that they evaporate on the beach. So then she said, what is evaporation? And I said, well, let's look up evaporation. So then we went into the life cycle of water, and somehow we ended up learning about sea turtles, dolphins, and then we were looking up a recipe about donuts. Have no idea where somehow it took us down all of these rabbit holes, and we looked up about donuts, and we made donuts.
Wow. I mean, you
homeschooling.
You had me at tentacles, but you got all the way to donuts.
We got to donuts.
That is some extra frosting on the whole thing.
That is homeschoooling at its best.
Homeschoooling. Oh,
yes.
I love that idea.
Anyway, so I didn't coin the term.
What you did is you went spelunking. You got
Yes.
curious, and that curiosity pulls you along. So you don't have to wait for curiosity to come to you. You can go deliberately do curiosity when you choose to. It's like, I think I would like some dopamine right now. I'm going to go get curious.
I love that.
And so then you can use your, either your who, what, where, when, how, why prompts. You can start thinking about, connections or relationships or change or, other ideas, and sort of see, like, I'm going to look at this pomegranate through the lens of structure function, right? Like, okay, let's see what happens. And you can say, okay, what questions come to me? But you want to say, like, I wonder, and what you can even say it out loud. Like, what's the question here? What's the question? And the first questions that often come to you are like little questions.
Uh-oh. John, are you there?
I'm
Uh-oh,
still
John,
here.
I've
Can you
lost
hear?
you. It's still recording.
I hear you.
Okay, there you are.
Oh,
I lost you for just a second, but it's still recording. So
oh, okay.
that was really bizarre. I've never had that happen before. Okay, so pomegranate.
Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna rewind.
Rewind.
You put this pomegranate in front of you, and you start to say, like, who, what, where, when, how, why. Gosh, let's find the questions, the mysteries waiting in the pomegranate. You know that this pomegranate is filled with mysteries. The amount which science has figured out about pomegranates is the tiniest little fraction of the wisdom embedded in pomegranates, and so let's look at this from the lens of curiosity. What can we ask about this pomegranate? And you start digging, and usually the first questions that come to you will be they'll be little questions, right? So write those ones down. You kind of got to get through those ones to get to the big juicy ones. Are the question that is hiding behind the question. You want to get to the question behind the question behind the question. And you go several layers down, and the questions get really interesting. You often don't even have to answer some of these questions to get to a richer question behind it, where you can say, like, is that to do this? Well, and if it is, then why would this be, right? And so you can play with your curiosity. All of a sudden, the dopamine is sloshing around in your brain. You're going to be motivated then to make observations, to answer some of your questions. Sometimes we'll Google search something and you can figure out some of the answers there, but very easily, like any homeschool kid, give them 5 minutes and they should be able to start to come up with questions that Google has never thought of, right? This is maybe the first time anyone has really kind of gone down this particular rabbit hole, and here you are. There's not going to be a Wikipedia page for this one. And you don't want to settle for the question that is very often. This is kind of cool. Very often when we do a search for something that we're trying to find information about, well, a couple of things happen. We usually stop searching when we get something that confirms what we already believe. Right? So that's great. But there's another thing that happens, and that is when we cannot find the answer that we're looking for, we change our question to be one which we found. Right? I went in here trying to find out this thing, and now I know this other thing, right? And it's going to, and that's known. But instead of just, gosh, can I live with the mystery? Can I stay here in this sort of place of vulnerability where I don't know the answer and really embrace that? That's really, really cool. So don't change your question to match an answer you found.
Interesting.
Let curiosity be there and realize that, here is a mystery. Even some places, sometimes what I will do is, actually, I've got a nature journal here. Let me.
Yay! I'm excited to see.
So if you're listening, I will describe what I'm seeing on the nature journal page.
And if you want to watch, my friends, You can watch this episode on YouTube. So you may want to come back and watch it. Oh, I'm so excited.
I was over on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada. Beautiful range of mountains, and I'm going to try to find where I think this is the right sketchbook.
Look how gorgeous those notes are.
Oh, why can't I find this? I'm hoping that this is the right notebook. And what I was looking at were what are called the Crowley Lake columns. I was by the side of Crowley Lake, and I think I'm looking at the wrong journal. Oh, I don't think this will have the pictures of Crowley Lake. So you people who are watching it at home here, or listening on the radio, you don't have to go scampering over there right now. So let me I'll bounce back here and just describe this for you.
Okay, perfect.
By the side of this lake, there is this place where there are where a layer of volcanic ash is being eroded by a lake, an artificial lake. And where this is happening, as it erodes into this cliff face, there are these strange columns that are more resistant than the rest of the matrix of the surrounding rock. And so that it erodes around these columns, and so you get these strange vertical columns coming down, filling these caves. They're not stalactites, stalagmites. They're really, 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 really weird. And these, I went with my family to Crowley Lake. We went to the columns, and we always like what's going on here? So I started journaling about it, keeping all these notes, like taking in all this data. Like, is this petrified wood? Kind of look like, no, there's like, if that were the case, I would see this. I'm not. It's totally different texture. It's the same kind of ashy matrix. Like, what's going on with this? So we're geeking out with these columns. And by the time the day was done, I had several pages filled with notes about these columns. And I could not, for the life of me, figure out what's going on with the Crowley Lake columns. So then I got back home that evening. Actually, we were in a little motel. So I got back there, and they had an internet connection. And I pulled up my computer, and I typed in Crowley Lake columns. What forms them? Click. And one of the choices was that, scientists finally figure out what is causing the Crowley Lake columns. And my finger was heading for the button, getting closer, 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 closer. And then I stopped. And I thought to myself, you know what? On the other side of that click is an answer. And I know that when I get that, I'm going to get this feeling of task completion. And my brain might then take this incredible mystery and chalk that up to something that I now know and I now can forget about. Have you ever studied for a test and then you take the test and you forget everything?
Yeah.
That's called the Zergenic effect. And if you Zergenic yourself, you do this when your brain feels that a task is complete. And then we forget about it. Here I am, a long time later, talking about the Crowley Lake columns. Why? Because it's still an open loop in my brain. So sometimes I do look things up, but sometimes I let the mystery just hang out there. And I sometimes go to sleep, and as I'm laying there in bed, kind of beginning to drift off to sleep, and I don't count sheep, I'll think about what could be a mechanism for causing the Crowley Lake columns. So I've got these little kind of puzzles that could play in my head, and that keeps my brain just perking along, and the world is filled with mysteries. If you think it's filled with answers, you're not asking enough questions. There's mysteries everywhere. And sometimes what I'll do is when I get one little mystery answered, what I do then is I try to kind of open up a new loop on the other side of it. To say, can I find some way of having this new thing that I now understand help me be able to come up with the next question that is now going to be my new open loop. So that's just kind of that's a whole bunch about this curiosity thing. But curiosity is so much fun. And oh my goodness, folks, you've got to go to Crowley Lake.
I know. Now I'm like, I have to go to Crowley Lake and take a notebook.
And think of and when you do, think of how tempting it will be to click on that link. Right? Something that I regularly do with my daughters is we have this card deck of sort of mind-bending puzzles.
Ooh.
And as we eat breakfast in the morning, we'll try to solve a puzzle or two. And we'll get on these really good ones. And the answer is right on the back of the card. And something that we like to notice is how tempting, when you can't figure it out, how tempting it is to flip the card.
And find out.
Yes, because
it was a surprise, though.
Yeah, and when you do, then it's they're like, oh, that's it. Oh, okay. It's like, and it's just like magic tricks. Everybody wants to know how the trick was done. If the magician tells you, you would be really underwhelmed. So don't flip the card over. Let your brain be there in that struggle. And just sort of celebrate with yourself, like, isn't it interesting how much I want to flip that card? I want the answers. I don't want to be in the process of puzzling. I want the answers. And I think we're in a culture that really loves getting the answers. And the answers, it's just a click away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true.
But no, let yourself be a problem solver. Play with the mysteries. Don't jump to the back of the book. Don't flip the card. Be there with it. And so what we'll do is one person will kind of get onto it, and sometimes they will give a small hint to the rest of us who are stuck, and eventually we'll kind of all arrive there together. And then we like to unpack, why were we stuck? What was going on in our thinking that we could not figure this little, this mind trap out, the little box of questions. It's called mind trap. So we'll sit there with our little box of mind traps. And it is a great way for us to practice critical thinking and getting comfortable with not knowing stuff.
Yeah.
So, and that's only two of the parts of kind of what's going on in the nature journaling. I said there were three things. We talked about I notice and I wonder.
And then it reminds me of.
So, and this one is often the sort of neglected stepchild of I notice, I wonder. Many people do not give it reminds me of its due. And so I want to unpack with you why, you can say okay, I see why you're asking questions.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see why you're making observations, but how come it reminds me of? Why do I care about that? So what this is about creative thinking. That's what it reminds me of hook is. It is creative thinking. And I know creativity is sort of one of these terms that if you're a parent, you're going to see this everywhere. If anybody's selling you an app, if anybody's selling you a little thing that you can dangle above your baby while they're on their back, right? They'll say this will enhance creativity. It's just marketing. It has nothing to do with creativity. So it's just this overused word. But here, being a little scientist, I want to define my terms. So when I talk about creativity, I say that creativity is your brain's ability to make useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. Useful connections between seemingly unrelated things. So if you practice finding these connections and relationships, you will have a brain that gets really comfortable at networking ideas. This is like that, but not in this way. It's different like this, but it's similar over here. And this can be as sort of scientific or metaphoric or playful as you're feeling on that day. You just want to see what is connecting in your electric meat that in one way or another is going to tap into this and can be part of the conversation. Maybe this is something that you learned in a school. Maybe this is something that you read. Maybe this is a quote that moves you. Maybe this is an observation that you once made in frozen ice. I guess all ice is frozen, right?
Right. It's true.
In non-redundant frozen ice. um, the and you want to, then you intentionally bring that in, and it helps you look at whatever phenomenon is in front of you in a slightly different way. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to get as many tools as I can to get my brain to play with the world and engage in a different way.
I love that. Okay, so we get the object or the thing we want to notice, we wonder, it reminds me of, and then we get it on those things on paper as well.
Right. So that is I like to think of it as two triads. One triad is I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of.
Okay.
And this then leads us to, that's the what. There's the how.
Okay.
And the how is the other triad. And what that is words, pictures, and numbers. And if you're a writer, start your journal with mostly words. And you already know how to do it. Go for it. I'm dyslexic, and I sometimes feel scared about writing words because I feel I'll be attacked by a giant red pen. And so I will often start my journal with drawing pictures.
Okay.
But I know that the part of my brain that is involved in creating images is different than the part of my brain that I use when I used language.
Yeah.
And it's not that one is better than the other, it's just that they're fundamentally different. Mm-hmm. So what I want to do is to intentionally use both of those.
Okay.
So I'm going to maybe I start drawing pictures, but then I start also, how can I describe this? Or maybe there's a question or it reminds me of. I start writing all over the page as well. Mm-hmm. And when I write, I'm not worried about my spelling. I'm not worried about my grammar. When I am drawing, I'm not worried about making a pretty picture. I'm not worried about making it look good. It's about the ideas and the thoughts and the experience, the observations. I want to dance with those. Similarly, I'm going to bring in numbers.
So
What can I
say,
count?
how does that work? So what can I count?
Right. So
keep going.
So I can count petals. I can count sepals. I can count numbers of ducks on the pond. I can count for how many seconds the grebe goes underwater until it resurfaces again. I can take several measurements and get an average of those. I can, so measuring, estimating, timing. The part of our brain that is involved with numbers is also different than the part of your brain that's involved with language. So in fMRIs, there is a strip of gray matter that is sort of above where your ears are in the middle of your skull that lights up when we start trying to use numbers. And your prefrontal cortex, that's the front of there. You're doing a lot of your language stuff there, and your visual cortex towards the back of your brain. These are physically actually different regions of your brain. Now, any brain function, anytime you're thinking about anything, your whole brain is doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But there's more blood flow to these zones. They're getting some extra love when you change it up. So to make myself think differently, I will say to myself, like, how could I try thinking about this with numbers? How could I bring numbers into this? How could I describe this more with words? And when I intentionally do that, I give myself another opportunity to change my perspective and think more deeply. And for a lot of people, they resist the numbers. And what I hear a lot it from folks is that, well, if turn it into numbers, that's just going to kind of somehow suck the life out of this. I want to be more kind of open and fluid and creative, and the numbers are just going to sort of stifle me into some rigid box. I think that the reason that people think that way about numbers has to do with how we were taught math.
Mm-hmm.
If you were taught math as speed multiplication tables and calculation, never looking at using it as a tool for exploring ideas and thinking, you will hate math.
That's true.
Imagine if you learned literature, learned about writing and those sort of things by studying spelling and rules of grammar, but you never got to read a book.
That'd be awful.
It would be awful. That's how we teach math.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
That's how we teach math. It's like, here's some rules, memorize this stuff. Here's some more rules, memorize those. I learned square roots as something to calculate.
Yeah.
As opposed to a beautiful picture. Square roots is a fascinating, beautiful picture. But it's not taught that way. It's not taught of as an idea. It is like, can you draw a picture of a square root? And what most people do is draw the little square root symbol.
Yeah, that's what I would think of. What would you draw?
Well, now for this, folks at home, you're going to want to go check out the video, because we're going to pop over there and we're going to draw a picture of square roots. Now, for something like the square root of 4, that's really easy, right? But let's take a look at how you can visualize that. But then let's try something like the square root of 5 or the square root of 7 or something goofy like that. And let's look at the picture.
So excited.
So, yeah, you bet you didn't expect this conversation to go this way.
I totally didn't expect that we'd squirrel this way.
Yeah, so squirrel.
It's a squirrel. And I love it because I've never understood the purpose of square roots, frankly.
Yeah. Because it's just like, here's another thing to memorize. And
right.
Just think like, so before we do, I just want to say this about math. All right. Math is just another language for describing the world. And it is as beautiful as the world that it describes. And same with the words and language. Words and are a tool, a language for describing the world. And again, if it was just grammar rules, it would be useless and ugly and kind of clunky.
Yeah.
But we start sort of looking at the beauty of numbers and playing with numbers and playing with ideas. And I'll show you in my journal some places that I'm kind of geeking out with this. And you'll sort of see like, oh, you can have fun with numbers. Yeah, it is. Let's play with some square roots.
Hooray.
All right, so what I've got is a blank piece of paper. And I'm going to draw a picture of the square root of 4. And by 4, what I mean is I'm drawing a box here. And I'm going to... actually, let's do this. We'll start here easy. This is the square root of 4. So in this picture is the square root of 4. This length of the line, I've drawn a box here divided into quarters. Right? So imagine, folks at home, a box with a T through the middle of it. And there's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Its volume is 4. And its side, the root of this square, is too long. This square has a root that is too long. Its root is this base of this square. The square root of 4 is 2.
That is cool.
Now to make this even cooler, let's do you want to do square root of 5 or 6, or what do you want to do?
Yeah, how about we do a square root of 7?
Square root of 7. What would that look like? Well, so, okay, so 4, and then I'm going to I'm going to draw 3 more boxes on my screen here. So 4, I've already got 4 up there. So 5, 6, 7. Right? So there's 5, 6, 7. Now, how can I get these in here? Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one here and this one here, and I'm going to cut them in half. And I'm going to take this part here, and I'm going to attach it right on here. So I'm sticking it up on the side of my box. And I'm going to take this one here. So I'm cutting one of these little extra squares in half, and I'm going to stitch it over onto my big square.
Okay.
So now, so I've now got this one here. And let's take this little piece over here. Okay, I'm going to bring that here. All right, that is, and then I'm going to bring this one over here. All right, so those ones are now all accounted for. I've now sort of cut these squares. I've sort of slid them around. There's a little gap here that is a half by a half. I'm going to steal that from down here. All right, and so I'm going to plug that hole with that little piece there. I still have all this to go. So what I've done is I have removed a quarter of the remaining square and used it to plug a little hole that I have up here. Here's one, this is 1/2. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to try to take this space here and stick it into this drawing here. So
okay.
I'm going to try to put one piece along here, one piece along here, one piece along here, one piece along here. That will be, so if I divide this into sort of eighths of this original thing, I'm now going to take an 1/8 piece, and I'm going to stick that right here. I'm going to take this 1/8 piece, I'm going to stick it right here. Oh, friends on the radio, this is not good radio, I know, but maybe
They can watch it on YouTube.
All right, I'm going to put this one over here. I'm going to take this one over here and put that over there. All right, now I've only got this left.
Ooh.
All right, so let's take half of that. All right, and I am going to take this little half here and I'm going to put it here. I'm going to take this little piece here and I'm going to stick it in over there. Now I only have this little piece here. Well, so that was, so here's a space that's 1/4 by 1/4. And I can take that little piece, and I'm going to stick it in there.
We're still left with that little piece.
All right. And so now I'm left with this little piece. And you can see I could, by kind of trimming off finer and finer pieces, continue to sort of slip this around the edge. Or what I could say, let's see, I've got 2 plus 1/2 plus 1/8. All right, so this is what, 4/8. So this is 5/8. So the square root of 7 is, because there's still some left over here, it is just a little bit more than 2 and 5/8. And we could convert that to decimal, right? And actually, why don't we do that right now? So if we've got, how do we convert 5 eighths into a decimal?
You divide it.
Okay, so can you pull out a calculator and do that for me right
I
now?
sure can, yeah. See, 5 divided by 8? 0.625.
So 2.625. Now what I'm going to ask you to do is to use your calculator to calculate the square root of 7, and I'm saying that it should be a little bit more than 0.625.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, sorry, 2.625.
Okay, let's see. I've never used this calculator before. It is 2.645751311,
Which is a little bit more than
which is just a little bit more.
2.625. But we estimated this accurately to the first decimal, and kind of with some rounding, we're right in the ballpark.
That's amazing.
Isn't that crazy? By drawing pictures of squares and then slicing things and slapping it around, all of a sudden it's the root of a square. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy cool.
What's weird to me is that we teach it with the calculation, and we're not thinking about it in terms of ideas.
It's true.
And so I think this is a great kind of example of just the degree to which math is taught as calculation and speed multiplication.
Yeah.
And so another thing that I like to do with my daughters is we play number games. Right? They're not problems. We play some number games, and it's really, really fun to try to kind of get your brain to stretch and think with some math puzzles. And I'll just kind of give you an example one.
Yeah,
And folks at home, you can try this too. But here's the deal. Don't go look this up. So these are things that there's a little girl at my daughter's school who's crazy sharp, and I gave her these puzzles in 3rd grade, and she solved them during lunch.
Oh my gosh.
And so check this out. So here's the first puzzler. Right, there's these lily pads growing on this pond, a little pond out back.
Okay.
And every day, the amount of space covered by these lily pads doubles. So if they covered 1 square foot today, tomorrow it'll be 2 square feet. The next day it would be 4 square feet. So the amount of space doubles every day.
Okay.
And then in 35 days, it covers the entire pond. On what day did it cover half the pond?
Wouldn't it be day?
That's right. It takes a particular kind of visualization to be able to answer that. So here's another one. A bat and a ball
Okay.
cost $1.10. The bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost?
Is it 10 cents?
So what was really fun is that you just gave the answer that most graduate students at MIT gave.
Because if a bat and ball together is $1.10.
Yeah. So you are in good company with all of those graduate students at MIT. The problem is it's wrong.
Darn it!
No, 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 no. Don't feel bad. No,
It's okay. I'm going to figure it out.
no, no. See, what it is and once you figure it out, there's this like, aha, oh, that's elegant. Oh, isn't that interesting? But what is interesting about this is that there is an easy answer that jumps to your head.
Yeah.
And so what you actually did is you solved a easier, different problem than the actual problem. I'll repeat the question one more time. A bat and a ball cost $1.10. The ball costs $1 more than the bat. Sorry, the bat costs $1 more than the ball. How much does the ball cost? And there is an easier problem. And what our brains will do is substitute the easy problem for the actual problem that I asked. And that, thinking of these as puzzles, and then what the family does is we sit around the table at breakfast and we're geeking out on these things and kind of struggling with sort of being in this uncomfortable place of struggle, that productive struggle, and playing with that. This is kind of a squirrel path away from the nature journaling, but I guess what we're talking about here is just how much fun it is and how useful it is to practice our thinking and our critical thinking, and to play with these things and have it be a game, and where we don't judge ourselves. So, by the way, just so you know, the first time somebody told me this is called the bat and ball problem, folks, don't just Google bat and ball problem, right?
I'm tempted.
You can do this. The math is not complex. Again, this third grader figured out the bat and ball problem. But it does take really paying attention to what the question specifically is. When this was presented to me, I got it wrong. Again, most these graduate students at MIT got it wrong. And it's not something that, so there's no shame in that, but it is really, really interesting to be aware of kind of how is it that our brain thinks, and when we see kind of the shortcut, right? Our brains take it. Mine did.
Yeah.
Right. First time I tried to solve the bat and ball problem, I didn't see it. Eventually I figured it out. Because Daniel Kahneman, in his book Thinking Fast and Slow, talks about these sort of two...
I love that book.
Yes. That's actually, if you want the spoiler, Daniel Kahneman discusses the bat and ball problem in that book.
Yeah, and I haven't read it for 10 years, so now I'm like, I have to go back and read the book because I don't remember the bat and ball problem.
Yeah, and what it is that the part of your brain that you need to solve the bat and ball problem is system 2. And you jumped to a system 1 kind of quick answer. I did too. So no judgment here.
Thank you.
And it's just, it's really, really interesting. But it is fun to think. And the more we let our brains out to play, and feel comfortable not knowing stuff, feel comfortable being in limbo about stuff and puzzling over things and trying to find a solution, I think that is absolute gold. And if in your family there's a culture of playful creativity with this, where you love just kind of geeking out together, like my daughters, this game, I think the name of the game is Mind Trap. This thing where we have the little cards where we can flip the things over. Again, you'll feel the temptation to flip it. Yeah. I still feel the temptation to flip it, but then we don't, and we and on some of them where we've been puzzled, my daughters are then kind of like, when we kind of sort of turned around and kind of came up with a solution, and then we looked at the back. My daughters actually came up with some better solutions or reasons why the solution that they had on the back of the card was not adequate. And like thinking is fun. Our brains are this one of the most untapped instruments of pleasure that we have. And the more we can kind of just get in there and celebrate and have a party inside your brain, that is really, really powerful. Now, I'm going to interrupt myself for just a moment because I just heard the doorbell ring, and I think it's my daughter coming home from school. I'm going to run over there. I'm going to give her a kiss and a welcome home. I'm going to point her towards some snacks, and then I'll be back.
And that is a perfect stopping place until next week when Jack shows us exactly how to nature journal. My friends, you're going to want to get out a notebook and a pencil and paper because it's kind of cool what he's going to show us. We'll talk next week. You got this.